these are all the books I read in January 2025.
No spoilers.
Starting with Red Rising by Pierce Brown, and I gave it 2 stars. I really wanted this to be good because I heard it was like Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, which is one of my favorite series ever, but it wasn't good to me. it was so boring and so long. Like, I don't believe it is this size. It was so long, and the only reason why I got through it is because of looking up chapter summaries. I really liked a betrayal that happens in the book, but I didn't know it happened because during listening to the audiobook, I zoned out because it was so boring, and then I picked up the bits and pieces and I was like, holy shit, that happened. And I went back and listened to the chapter, and turns out that did happen, and I wasn't even listening. I really liked the premise though, so I wish it was good, but I'm not finishing the series. And I also don't understand why there's a wing. I get on the cover, I get it's Red Rising in the wing. They don't have wings. Or did I just not listen to it good enough? Because that could very well be it. But I even looked on Reddit, and they don't have wings, I think. So that was that one. The next one was Something Wicked Comes This Way by Ray Bradbury. And I love his writing. And I was like, I should read all his books. But he's written this many. Which, I've read all of Frederick Bachman and I've read all of V.E. Schwab. But I don't think either one of them has written that many books. And it turns out this was published, he's an oldie because this was published in 1962. I didn't know that until I looked inside of this. But it makes sense because this has very old vibes, which I really liked. And turns out he wrote Fahrenheit 451, which I'm pretty sure is a famous book. So that's cool. But yeah, I really like this book. And I loved seeing what the characters were going to do next. And I loved that it was in, like, I think they're 12-year-old boys' perspectives, because it felt frustrating that the parents weren't listening and that the boys felt like they couldn't tell anyone. And I feel like I wasn't as scared because it was in little boys' perspectives. But I really liked how it ended. I really enjoyed this book through and through. Originally I gave it 5 stars. I'm debating on that now because it didn't leave an imprint on my soul, so I kind of want to bump it down to 4. But because he's like a classic author, I kind of want to leave it at 5, but I don't know. I mean, like, you could argue that this is a classic for today's day, and I gave it a 2, so felt like it. which is how I give my ratings, is a spur of the moment feeling. It was 2 vibes. There's a whole section in the back. It's a thick section too. It's about that much, I think. Oh, it's exactly this much. And it mentions that Margaret Atwood, who wrote The Handmaid's Tale, was a big fan of his, which is awesome. So am I. Now I am. And then the next one I read was Red Queen, because after reading Red Rising, I needed back a good Red Rebellion. So I did that. Now, this book is young adult, and I can definitely tell because I struggle liking young adults now. And I struggle liking this now that I am an adult. But it was my favorite series in junior high and high school. and it's a favorite now, and so it has a place in my heart. Given that, I still didn't give it 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars because I can see why I wouldn't like it now. Well, not that I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't give it a 5-star now. Anyways, with that said, it is still a pretty good book. This is part of the $200 LitJoy edition with spade edges, which does have the crown on it that was on the original cover. This is our main character, Mayor Barrow. It has Victoria Aveyard's signature. And then it has her annotations in black, and then I put my annotations in red, obviously. It has fan art. Not fan art necessarily, but like illustrations. So cool. Anyways, one thing I liked about this, which I want to go more in depth with in like another video, is it mentions a character in her new series, Realmbreaker. So in this book, there's a very side character that I completely forgot about, even though I reread this like every year, named Tristan, who has red hair. And in this book, one of the main characters is named Terriston with red hair. So that's pretty cool. The betrayal, I think it was good. The problem with that is I read it when I, was beginning to read things, so I wasn't very good at comprehending anything. All I did was put words in my head, and eventually it was a story. So I didn't know that there was supposed to be betrayal. I just know that one point I read this, and the next point I read that, and that's what the book was. Looking back, if I could read it for the first time, I think it would be phenomenal. The pacing was pretty good, which I think Victoria Aveyard could work on in her newer books, even though I love her so much. Love her so much. And it had a really good romance, because I like slow burn, and they were just cute. The next one, I don't have a copy of, the library didn't either, but it's called Diavola by something Thorne. I don't remember. And it was a horror book about this family who goes to stay in a mansion in Italy, and it's haunted. And I loved it. It kept me scared, but in a right amount. I had to take a break from scary books after watching Smile 2 because I got so scared. So what I did this time was I only listened to it before my dinner break, because after my dinner break is when I lock up the building by myself in the dark. I turn off the lights. So I think this was a good book to jump in because the main character tries not to be scared, which I do think is a little crazy of her because I would literally be shitting my pants. But I think it's valid. You're in a scary haunted house and you don't want to prove you're scared so that the ghost doesn't scare you more. That is fair. And the book deals with issues with family, which I really liked because I can relate to it. Anna, the main character, just doesn't get along with her family very well. And her family kept saying, like, it's your fault, blah, blah, blah. I never saw anything wrong with Anna, to be completely honest. The older sister, Nicole, was a complete bitch. I hated her. The parents were not parenting. The nieces were totally being nieces. And I loved that it took a haunted ghost for Anna to finally take control of her life and do something with it that she wanted. So relatable. And I loved the twists. I really was rooting for evil in this book. I was like, just let Anna die. I don't care anymore. I really liked that, how it went. What happened? I gave that 4 stars. I forgot to mention, I think. Anyways, these are all the books with one more that I read this January.